And now we ask you to welcome to the stage the Honorable Congressman from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen.
Boy, we got a 1-2 punch here. Paul Ryan is chairman of the... Paul Ryan and Chris Van Hollen are actually interconnected in more ways. Paul Ryan is chairman of the House Budget Committee. The ranking Democrat on the House Budget Committee is Chris Van Hollen. Paul Ryan ran for vice president on Mitt Romney's ticket. The person that played Paul Ryan briefing and prepping Vice President Biden was Chris Van Hollen. I want to introduce to you absolutely one of my all-time favorite members of the United States House of Representatives. I think that's a fair statement. Chris represents the 8th Congressional District in Maryland, one of the wealthiest, you know. And yet, I know of no member in the House that carries a compassion and a belief on providing opportunity for all of its citizens more than Chris Van Hollen. He is. I first met him when he was on Education and Labor, and it was evident then. See, he was sort of in the lower row. It was evident then that Chris is going to be a superstar, and I mean that. And one of the first serious conversations when you're thinking about running for the Senate. And Chris had two options out there. One, he could stay in the House and then one day be Democratic leader. That's how much he's respected. Or he could go for the Senate, which someday he may be in the United States Senate. But through whatever course he chooses, the most important debate on our economic policies, our futures, our priorities, Chris is at the center of that. Democrats in Congress, whether they be in the Senate or the House, are very lucky that someone of the capability, the intelligence, the commitment is at the center of that fight, and that's Chris Van Hollen. So it really is, with all sincerity and humility, I introduce to you, I think, one of the giants of our time and one of the finest public servants I've ever worked with. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with all of you, and I want to start by thanking all of you for the work that you do on the front lines of our neighborhoods, in our communities, trying to empower our constituents, the people of this country, who sometimes need a little bit of a hand up as they're struggling, to help empower them to reach their full potential. And I really, and all of us are grateful for the work that you do there. To the board, thank you for all the work that you do to help this organization grow and do the good work that it does. And to my friend David Bradley, I just want to salute you, because all of you know this, but if there's one person who has been more persistent and more tenacious in terms of trying to make sure that at the federal level we provide the resources to help lift more people up in this country, that's David Bradley. So really, David, thank you very much for all your work. And I'm pleased to be here with my friend Paul Ryan. We are friends. We get along very well personally. We do have very deep differences on some policy matters, and I'm going to address some of those issues because those are not personal differences, but there are differences in terms to approach on the budget. But I want to start first on an area where I think everybody agrees, which is that our focus in this country needs to be on making sure that every individual who is seeking work and seeking a job can get a job, which means getting the economy moving again and getting more people back to work. And there are a number of things we should be doing to do exactly that. One is we should be eliminating many of the perverse provisions in our tax code that actually reward and encourage some of our corporations to move jobs overseas. We want to We want to ship American products overseas. We don't want to ship American jobs and American investments overseas. So as you see the proposals that I put forth with many of my colleagues in the House in the Democratic caucus, we'll be moving to shut down some of those tax breaks and use those savings to invest right here at home in education and jobs and worker training and things to help put people back to work right here in the United States of America. And we got to do that. We've also got to make sure that as we get more people back to work and get the economy growing, that we have shared prosperity in this country, right? Worker productivity over the last decades has gone up at a very fast rate, but real wages for the average American have not kept pace with that. And so you've seen an extraordinary rise in income at the very top without any shared prosperity with the broad middle or in the bottom. And so one small but real step we can take to address that issue is to raise the national minimum wage in this country to $10.10 an hour and get that done. Because I agree with my friend Paul Ryan, if you're going to go to work, we should make sure that work pays. And one way to do that is to make sure that people have at least close to a living wage in their pocket when they work full-time. Because as you know, right now in this country, you can have a family, 2 kids, work full-time, and still be below the federal poverty level. That is not the way it should work today in the United States of America, and we need to address that issue and address it now. There are also about 2 million Americans right now who in this economy are struggling and are looking every day for a job but can't find it because we still have an economy where 3 people are looking for every job. And so as all of you do work to try to provide training and opportunity to those individuals, we also need to make sure that they can put food on the table and pay the rent, and that's why we should extend the emergency unemployment compensation, and we should do that now. And as we do all those things, we need to keep doing the work that you're doing every day in our community, which is to try to identify the special needs that each of you faces. Because as you know, as I heard Paul Ryan say, it's not one size fits all. It is important to be able to tailor our programs and resources to meet the particular needs of each neighborhood and each community. And that is where the work that you do is so vital, because you use those resources to look at the community and make decisions as to how those resources can be put to best use to help empower individuals and families. Maybe it's some job training. Maybe it's a broken home and you need to provide some resources to help people get back on their feet or help stabilize a family. There are lots of different approaches to doing this, and you're able to use the flexibility of the Community Services Block Grant funds to address those very specific needs. And so that flexibility is very important. Now, I want to say a word about the war on poverty, because we just passed the 50th anniversary of President Johnson's declaration of war on poverty this past January. And all of you know better than anybody that we've got a long, long way to go to make sure that more Americans are lifted out of poverty. We have an unacceptable 40 million Americans today below the federal poverty level. So we need to do better. But it's also a mistake to suggest that there are not large successes in the war on poverty. And if you looked at the report that came out of the Council of Economic Advisors on the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty, you would find that as a result of the work that has been done in trying to provide more economic security to individuals and families so they can help lift themselves up, as a result of things like the food and nutrition programs, as a result of the workforce training programs, as a result of things like Medicaid that help provide health care for lower income individuals, and as a result of the work that you're doing in the trenches every day, there are 40 million Americans today who are not in poverty who otherwise would be. That is an awful lot of Americans that are better off because of the work we're doing. So the answer is not to ignore the gains that we've made and to put together budgets that would dismantle some of the programs that have been successful at lifting 40 million people out of poverty. That is not the answer. Yes, we should always be willing to reform. Yes, we should always be willing to look for a better way to do it, but not where a better way of doing it is simply an excuse to radically reduce the amount of resources we dedicate to this challenge. Now, let me say a word about the president's budget, because it has some good things and it has some bad things, right? One of the good things, for example, is he does increase funds for Head Start. Very important early education program. We should be expanding our funds for Head Start. Again, we need to make sure and tailor these programs so they work in the most effective way possible, but we need to expand Head Start and early education. He also increases funds for some child care programs. Very important, as all of you know, as you have, both when you have family members who are, in a job and want to make sure that their kids are well taken care of and secure in a safe and learning environment, that's a good thing. Now, on the other hand, of course, the president's budget, as it did last year, proposes to cut fundings for the Community Services Block Grant. That is a mistake. That is a mistake. And I'm proud to join with my colleague Jim Costa and others. I think Jim was here a little bit earlier. Jim Costa and Betty McCollum and others in calling upon the Appropriations Committee to make sure that we fund the Community Services Block Grant at last year's level at least. And as you know, last year we saw this proposed cut in the president's budget, and yet we were able to restore and in fact increase the funding to $674 million, and we want to make sure that we maintain that level going forward. But let me just say, as we look just a little bit over the horizon into the next fiscal year, I just want to draw your attention, since you're here on Capitol Hill, to what will happen if we're not able to reach another round of budget agreements. Because under that scenario, the sequester, the so-called very deep across-the-board cuts, are going to spring back to life. They're in current law. They're embedded in current law. Now, we were able to reach an agreement, Paul Ryan, Patty Murray, and the others of us on the budgets committees, to avoid the worst of that in the current fiscal year. We have a very tight budget in fiscal year 2015, but we were able to avoid some of the roughest edges. But starting in fiscal year 2016, those sequester cuts automatically spring back into place under current law. And you're also here at a very opportune time because this coming week is when our Republican colleagues intend to introduce their budget, Monday or Tuesday of this week. We will have a markup, a voting session in the House Budget Committee on Wednesday. And this is where I just want to highlight the areas of agreement and disagreement. We all agree, Paul Ryan and I agree, everyone in this room agrees that with the resources we have, we should make the most effective use of it. And all of us should be willing and open to trying new ideas to make sure those resources, taxpayer resources, are deployed as effectively as possible. And everybody needs to be held accountable. But as I indicated earlier, there's a difference between making sure we are reforming and making sure the resources are going to the most effective use and decimating funding for these programs. And if the past is prologue, and if we see a budget this year from our Republican colleagues that's the same as last year, what you will see over the next coming 10-year window is a budget that maintains the overall sequester level, very tight, but the allocation between the funds for defense spending and non-defense spending will be totally lopsided. So the budget will significantly increase what we call discretionary funding for defense significantly by hundreds of billions of dollars. And in order to maintain overall spending at sequester levels, they will propose deep, deep cuts below sequester funding for all the non-defense, the domestic discretionary spending, which is the account that the Community Services Block Grant finds itself in. That's the account where you have Head Start. That's the account where you have LIHEAP. That's the account where you have lots of the housing programs that also help support struggling families and individuals. So at the end of the day, these budgets are a reflection of what we care about and our priorities. They're literally where we decide to put our collective monies. And so I just urge you to look closely at those budgets. The last Republican budget also proposed getting rid of entirely the social services block grant, taking that to zero. And as I indicated, if you're going to cut the other parts, this part of the budget, well below sequester levels, there's no way you can have child care services where we've got them. There's no way you can have CDBG where you've got it. There's no way you can have Head Start where you've got it. That's just a mathematical fact. So let's look at these budgets and measure their impact on our goal, which is to try to expand opportunities for more and more individuals and families in America. And that's the work that you're doing every day. That is the work that you're doing every day, the vital work, trying to piece together the resources in the most effective way to bring more hope and more opportunity to more Americans. And we salute you for the work you do. We want to be a partner with you in that effort to make sure that you have the resources to listen to your ideas on how we can most effectively accomplish that goal together. So thank you, God bless you, and look forward to working with you as we move forward to the next one.